Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Sports Ball Talk Show. Gian, do not look sad. It is a beautiful day. Good news to talk about today. Lots of news. Lots of NFL stuff. I have a note sheet because the deadline for the franchise tagging just ended. So that means that any sort of contract negotiations, releases, actual franchise tagging that involves the team had to have been done. So the way it works is each team gets one for offense, one for defense, and you can either do an exclusive or a non-exclusive, which we'll get into in a little bit because that does matter with one of these. But a lot of teams needed to figure out other things before this, like the Giants, for example, had to figure out what they're going to do with Danny Dimes before they figured out if they could franchise tag Saquon or not. So all this stuff has happened. There's been some major signings, major trades. We're going to get into it. So I'm going to start off with some of the easier, light stuff that's just, oh, cool, here's this, and then we'll move on to the next stuff. And then we'll get into some of the heavier stuff, some of the NFL ruining teams like the Saints, who are basically just killing the NFL. And then some good teams that did some good stuff, like the Giants. I like what the Giants did. But anyway, we'll get started. First off with
I like what the Giants did.
First off with the Jaguars, they have franchise tagged Evan Ingram. I think that was a good play. He played very well this season. He didn't play that well in the Giants, but I think he's proven himself to be a good target of Trevor Lawrence's in Jacksonville. So franchise tagging him as opposed to signing him to a long-term contract where they can kind of figure out if this is a fluke year or not, I think was good. And then the other thing with the Jaguars is that Calvin Ridley has officially been reinstated. He was suspended for a full year for gambling, and now he's coming back. And I don't know if you guys remember, but whenever he was playing, he was a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I expect him to pick up right where he left off as a top 10 receiver. I put him in the likes of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Stephon Diggs type receivers where they have a decent build, but they're not big-bodied guys, but they have really clean route running, great hands, good in contested catch, that type of receiver. And now Trevor Lawrence has that. Now the question is, what are they going to do with some of their other receivers? Like they got Christian Kirk on a long-term deal, so I expect his production to be a little bit lower than when he was a wide receiver one for the Falcons, just because he's going to be splitting that with Christian Kirk, and then also Evan Ingram here. You also got a couple other guys like Marvin Jones and Zay Jones Jr. that are on that team that I think Zay Jones Jr. deserves a big not necessarily a big contract, but he deserves a contract somewhere. I don't know if that's going to be the Jaguars or what else, but Jaguars have their receiving core now pretty well stacked and solidified for next year, so good for them. Moving on, the Cowboys have franchise tagged Tony Pollard. I think everyone kind of expected this to happen, but now that it's actually happened, I think people are now thinking they will move on officially from Ezekiel Elliott, which is a good move because Zeke is a not good player. He's a washed running back. And
I have something to say about that, but I'll save that for later.
if it's about this, go ahead. I mean, this ain't going to be a long conversation about...
I mean, I think that everybody says that, but if you look at his production over the last 6 years, he's been one of the top 3 best producing running backs in the NFL over the last 3 years. You know, just stat-wise, I understand that maybe he doesn't have, like, the clutch factor that other running backs do, but he is definitely, I mean, yes, he's not like a top 5 running back in the NFL, but he's not a scrub. And I think that moving on from him, I think that the teams moving on from the 2 running backfield is kind of, a mistake, whether it's the Browns or the Cowboys or, teams like the Broncos or, something like that, where I think you see the benefits of splitting, the load like that, and I don't necessarily think if they move on from Tony Pollard that they're going to be seeing the output from him that they saw this year. I think one of the reasons that you saw the output this year that you saw from him was because he was splitting, time with Zeke, so he didn't have to do quite as much as he would as RB.
I honestly, I completely agree with what you said. I think Tony Pollard is going to regress a little bit in terms of his, like, let's say, average yards per carry, because he's not going to be that guy. But what I do slightly disagree with, is the Zeke still being a guy. Like, he is a guy in the sense that he's really good at one thing, which is short yardage. Like, if they're on a 3rd and 1 situation or they're on a goal line situation, he's really good at getting in there. He had 12 touchdowns this past year, which speaks for itself, but he only had 800 yards. The year before, he barely touched 1,000. Year before that, less than 1,000, and these are all on well over 200 rushing attempts. So while I don't think that he's like a bad running back and he should not have a job, he's definitely not worth what the Cowboys are paying him. And so I think that moving on and putting Tony Pollard in the full-time role, even though I think Pollard isn't, I don't think he's going to be any prime Zeke, because prime Zeke was honestly disgusting. He was getting 15 touchdowns and 1,600 yards a season, which is kind of nasty. But I think putting Tony Pollard there, even though he's going to regress a little bit, I think is worth it because you're not spending so much money on Zeke because you are paying a premium for him because he's been a guy for a very long time. But yeah, I think Zeke goes somewhere that kind of just needs that type of running back. The Bills is one of my guesses. Just go there on a short contract. Because, I mean, one of the problems the Bills have had is they don't have a running back when they really need it because the two that they have, Devin Singletary and then James Cook, I should say, not really getting it done. Devin Singletary has never really been a guy, and then James Cook, I think, can be, but he was a rookie this past year, so I think given time to develop. Get a guy like Zeke in there where you can split the carries like he was doing in Dallas. It'll make it a little bit easier on Cook to get some yardage on, like, let's say, first and second down plays, and then Zeke on, like, red zone and third down plays. I think would be a nice setup for them. But once again, the cap issue is going to be a problem for them. They'd have to work out some sort of contract where Zeke's not going to get paid a ton, which I think would be okay because I think that he's at the point in his career where he's been playing for 8 years now, almost 7. This will be his 8th year, which is pretty long for a running back. I think he's okay going to a spot where he is just, let's say, ring chasing as opposed to being that bell cow back that is going to dig in for 400 attempts a season. But that's my prediction. Moving on to another running back, actually, Derrick Henry is on the trade block. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Titans are looking to go into a full rebuild, which I think is good because they spent way too much money on Ryan Tannehill, so now they're going to cut him. They're going to trade Derrick Henry, and then I guess go into a full rebuild, which leaves the AFC South wide open for the Jaguars, presumably for the next few years, and maybe the Colts if they figure out their whole thing. But they're going to get rid of Derrick Henry. And Gian, I'm curious where you think Derrick Henry will go. Bills were another popular option for where he might go, another guy that could really step up that offense, but I don't think they could afford him. Because you got to keep in mind, Derrick Henry, while he's been in the league for the same number of years as Ezekiel Elliott, he didn't play a lot of first 2 years. So he has, like, let's say 2 or 3 less playing years than Zeke, and he's still producing at a very high level this season, getting 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. Where do you think Derrick Henry goes? Where do you think would be a spot that, once again, being that he's probably in the latter half of his career, he's not going to sign a 5-year deal. Probably he's going to sign maybe a 2, maybe 3, but probably 1-year deal where he can maybe go win a ring. Where do you think that is, Gian?
Where he can maybe win a ring. This is actually a really interesting one. I didn't know that this was coming in. Definitely not the Panthers. I can't see anyone in the NFC South at all. Let's see. Do you think? No, the Ravens probably don't have any room either.
Not Ravens, no.
No.
Now, one thing that I have to throw out there, just because anytime that there's a big free agent available nowadays, you cannot not mention this team, and that is the Chiefs. The Chiefs have found a way to get big players when they need them, even if they don't have the money. They will find the money, and they will do it in a manner that doesn't screw over their team. So, I don't think that Chiefs should get it because they got Pacheco in there. And while McKinnon's a free agent, I really hope they re-sign McKinnon. But what if Derrick Henry just goes to the Chiefs? I mean, what would it...
It's not going to the Chiefs.
That's
just unnecessary expenditure at that point because you got so many dynamic weapons on the Chiefs.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm just saying, at this point, you have to mention them whenever that there's a big free agent. Like, same thing with DeAndre Hopkins. That's a potential guy going to a new team this offseason. You have to mention him. But one of my thoughts, and this is maybe a weird take, but you will see a pattern throughout some of these other ones. I think the Commanders are going to be very big players this offseason because the Commanders have already done some decent work with some of their signings and some of their cuts, some of their tags, stuff like that. What if Derrick Henry goes to the Commanders, man? That's a stacked NFC East right now.
That's where I was going with.
I mean,
man, that's what I was thinking right now, dude. If the Commanders pulled through, I mean, Antonio Gibson, he's been dropping a lot. He hasn't been as much of a stud as he once was. And then
what about Brian Robinson?
Brian Robinson, great player, don't get me wrong. But if you could have Brian Robinson as one of your sort of pass-catching dynamic back, but then you also have the other guy.
I'd say get rid of Gibson.
Can't remember his name.
Get rid of Gibson.
And get Henry.
Yeah. Because then you have your guy for rushing, and then you got your Brian Robinson for receiving, which Brian Robinson can rush, let's not get me wrong, but they could save Brian Robinson because he's still on a cheap rookie deal. Go and get Derrick Henry, and then let Brian Robinson do some of the receiving work until you don't have a Derrick Henry anymore, and then fill him in that in that spot.
And learn from the king, man, because Derrick Henry on that offense, because one of the things that offense struggled a lot was getting the ball down the field, whether it's throwing, whether it's running. That offense had a hard time. If you bring a guy like Derrick Henry, who's an absolute truck, who's an absolute stud of a football player and a stud of a bell cow running back, they're going to use him. That keeps a lot of their players, if they're going to use them for maybe a season or two, keeps a lot of their players from potentially getting injured, because a lot of the times that's what's been happening a lot lately with running backs. Keeping them from getting injured and having them come on the field, that would be... Ooh! As I'm explaining this... no, never mind. They got Najee Harris. I was thinking maybe the Steelers.
The thing is, there's a lot of teams that have young running backs that it seems like they're going to invest in. Like you got Najee Harris there. You got Pacheco with the Chiefs. You got James Cook with the Bills. Although I think the Bills would still go after him if they could. You got Travis Etienne on the Jaguars. So there's a lot of these teams, like especially ones that are in a position to win now, that already seem like they have their running back. Like teams that would need a running back, I would say. Probably the Bucs, although they had that rookie that did pretty well this season. I think they would still get him. The Falcons have a good running back, and Tyler Algier. The Panthers.
You know who desperately needs a running back?
Who's that?
The Miami Dolphins. We need a good running back, man.
Dude.
We do not have any good
Dude,
running
they
backs.
have Jeff Wilson.
And if we pick him up, that'd be great.
Okay.
I mean, Jeff Wilson's all right.
I'm a believer in
Offense,
the Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert backfield because I think I like what Frank was saying earlier, especially about the two-back system. I think that works. I think that's proven to work, especially if you can get it for cheap. Like Jerry McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, especially those last 4 games when McKinnon was getting 1 to 2 receiving touchdowns a game and Pacheco was getting 1 to 2 rushing touchdowns a game. I think that works. So I like the Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson. But Derrick Henry to the Dolphins could work because that would be nasty because neither one of those guys are top 10 running backs or probably even top 15 running backs. And if they went and got a Derrick Henry, I mean, because I was trying to think of like what teams like the Jets, but now they got Breece Hall. Like there's a lot of teams that already have a running back. It's like who's going to invest in that? I don't know, but the Dolphins are an interesting one. But I don't know. Man.
I'm thinking of one that you guys haven't put out there yet, and I think I texted you guys about this earlier. I think that. And I think this trade is a little. You guys, let me know what you think of it. But I have really been following what the Bears have been doing, and I think it's possible that the Bears could give up the first round pick to the Titans, and then they get pick number 11, pick 41, the 2024 first round pick from the Titans. And then Derrick Henry as well.
That's a good deal.
And that, I think, would shore up the entire offensive problem that the Bears have because they get a running back, that they need, and it's a win now, type of situation. It allows Justin Fields to stay in the pocket more and take the rushing, off of his back. And then it allows them to get Jackson Smith and Jigba at 11, who a lot of teams I think are passing on, but Justin Fields has that connection with because of Ohio State. So they have Justin Fields, they have Derrick Henry as their RB2, speaking of the RB2 system. They've got Khalil Herbert. And then as their wide receiver 1, they've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who you've seen the last few years, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, all these Ohio State wide receivers come into the NFL and make an immediate, impact. And then as the wide receiver 2, Chase Claypool, and wide receiver 3, Darnell Mooney. And I think that's, a pretty nasty offensive lineup. I think that puts them, up there with anybody, especially if the Packers get rid of, Aaron Rodgers. I think that vaults the Bears to the top of their division, and allows them to beat out the Lions and the Vikings.
That's interesting. So. Now, I've been saying the Bears a little bit too. The reason I don't say the Bears is because Derrick Henry's not 4 years younger. And I don't think that the Bears are in a win-now position, although the division is going to be weak because I think the Vikings are going to regress. The Packers, I think, regress without Aaron Rodgers unless Jordan Love steps up, which I think that he will, and I think most people think that he will, although not to, Aaron Rodgers caliber. I think the Lions are going to be nasty next year. I think they're going to get like 11, 12 wins, and I still think their receiving core is a problem. Even if they go draft a really good receiver, I think they need to do more than that. And then also they lost some defensive pieces this season they need to re-sign, or they need to refill. So although that makes sense on paper, I feel like if I'm Derrick Henry, which I could be wrong, I don't know if he wants money or a ring. I feel like he's at a point where he probably wants a ring, and I don't know if that's the place to do it. But that is what I think the biggest thing is, because they have the first-round pick they could give up. I don't know if I was the Bears, if I would give up the first-round pick for Derrick Henry either, just because they're not going to have him for that long, and they could get something else for that.
Well, they get pick 11, pick 41, and the first-round pick that the Titans have next year. So they're getting more picks out of it. They've reportedly been shopping that first overall pick because they don't need it. They're sticking with Justin Fields at quarterback. So, the Titans could sweeten, the honey pot a little bit, more, and, maybe throw something else in, maybe throw a defensive player in. That
could happen. I just feel like there's still too many holes with the Bears for that to be an attractive spot for Derrick Henry. Now, the two teams that I thought about that I haven't seen anywhere that wouldn't honestly make sense, and you're not going to think I'm stupid at first, but then I'll tell you something that will make you think that I am smart. Two teams that are in a good position right now that could win, that aren't spending money on running backs right now. One, the Chargers. Now, they have Austin Eckler, the best receiving back, arguably, in the league. But as a pure rusher, he's not that great. And they've tried it out with a couple other guys, and it hasn't worked. Now, the deal that Austin Eckler's on is still a rookie deal. I think it's $24 million over 4 years. So it's not like they couldn't afford Derrick Henry. So that's why I think that could be one thing. And they're both top 5 running backs, just at different things. They got him back there. Holy shit, that Chargers offense would be disgusting. Now, the other thing, our other team is the Bengals. Now, they have Joe Mixon, but I think that, I don't know if you guys have seen all the news lately around Joe Mixon. Well, I think that he's gone. So I think that they're going to be in need of a running back. And the Bengals, obviously in a win-now position where they're getting close every season, if not to the Super Bowl. Now, if they go get Derrick Henry, they could go win it too. And they have cap space, especially for the next year or so, while they still have guys like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow on rookie deals. They could go afford Derrick Henry. Now, I haven't seen anyone saying the Bengals, but get rid of Joe Mixon because he's a waste of money at this point. Too many off-field drama with the shooting issue, which I'm not even going to get into because this is children-friendly. This is a family show, all right? I'm not going to get into Joe Mixon shooting at his house. But he could go to the Bengals, and I think that would be in a very attractive spot for Derrick Henry because that's a team that could go win now and could afford him, especially if they got rid of Joe Mixon. But we'll see. Yeah. This will be a story that develops all offseason, and we'll talk about it as it happens. But moving on back to franchise taggings and more news, Josh Jacobs got tagged by the Raiders. I think we all expected this to happen after he had an incredible season with the Raiders that I think no one expected going into it. He was the best running back this season in a pure stats basis. So they tagged him, of course. Geno Smith re-signed with the Seahawks. I think it's $105 million for 3 years, so it's about $35 million, $30 to $35 million a year.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, does that not seem pretty insane to sign him for that amount of money? I don't think he was that good this year.
Here's the thing. I agree with you, but that's an unpopular opinion that you and I have, Frank. I'm not on the Geno Smith train. But if you think about it at this point, that's pretty cheap for a quarterback, especially a guy who did perform in a top 15 level. I mean, I'm not going to say he's top 10, but
Patrick Mahomes is making $24 million a year right now.
Yeah, but the Chiefs also got the absolute steal of the century with the deal with Patrick Mahomes. As much as people wanted to bitch about it at the time, look back, yeah. But, I mean, you got guys like Lamar Jackson right now that aren't going to go to a team for anything less than $200 million guaranteed. Like I said, you've still got all these guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow that need to get on big contracts, and the going price is $40+ million for a top guy. Geno Smith is not a top guy, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. He is a top 15 quarterback, probably somewhere in that 12 to 13 range in my opinion. Maybe a little bit higher. He did well this year. I personally wouldn't want him as my quarterback just because I don't think that he's I don't think that he's on the same level as the other, like, let's say top 5 to top 10 guys that will win you a ring. But if everything else goes right with the Seahawks, I could see them doing it with Geno. I honestly think it was a pretty good deal for the Seahawks just because, like I said, it's pretty cheap for a good quarterback at this point, and it leaves them room to spend money elsewhere. So I don't know. I think Geno Smith had a good season. I think that he had the coldest bar of the century after beating the Broncos in Week 1. And the commentator said, "How do you feel about the people who wrote you off?" And he said, "They wrote me off, but I didn't write back." And then that was just it sent the world into an eruption, which is awesome. But yeah, I think Geno Smith kind of fell off towards the latter half of the season. But now that he's got a good deal and they're going to seem to build around him maybe this offseason, I think that he could be a decent guy next year. And I think it was a pretty good deal for both sides. I think Geno Smith wasn't going to get any more money anywhere else, and I think the Seahawks got a pretty cheap quarterback that can get the job done. But moving on, this is going to be one of the bigger conversations. I'm going to have two of the bigger conversations with free agency trading and franchise tagging back to back. First, we'll start off with the good, because I think that starting off on a positive note is the right thing to do, even though that's the opposite of what they teach you in sales. The Giants. We're going to talk about Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley got tagged because 5 minutes before the tag deadline ended, Daniel Jones got his 4-year deal that he wanted, and so they were able to franchise tag Saquon Barkley. So Barkley is tagged. Daniel Jones is signed to a 4-year, $160 million deal. Now, before I tell you guys the details of this contract, I want you to ignorantly give me your opinion of it. Just reading the headline.
Ignorantly.
Just because I'm not going to...
Ignorantly.
Yes. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you the details after you give me your opinion, and then you might change your mind. So I want you to just read at face value, because I want to hear what you guys have to say about it in the same way that I've seen what everyone else says about it, which is 4 years for a 4-year, $160 million deal. So I want to hear before the details of the contract, just at face value, what you guys think of that deal.
All right.
I know a little bit more about the deal, so I will give you my the reaction you want to hear, and I think that is ridiculous. There's no way that he should.
Wait. You said you know the details and you don't think it was a good contract?
I think it's a good contract.
No. I said I'm saying that's what I think you wanted me to say, right?
I mean, I don't know. I wanted to.
That it was ridiculous.
No, I'm asking, do you think it's a good contract or not? Like you said you've read the details. I'll give him in a minute, but do you like the contract that he got? Do you think it's a good?
From whose point of view?
From the Giants. Like, do you think the Giants?
Yeah, I think the Giants.
Okay. What about you, Gian? Do you like the contract? And you were just a spectator.
I love the contract. I don't know the details, but I love it. Let me tell you why. You're investing, although it's a little heftier of an investment, $40 million for $40 million a year with Danny Dimes. Danny Dimes is still young. We've shown what all the development has led up to now. He's one of the more dynamic quarterbacks and just a giant. He's a literal giant on the New York Giants. He's a tall guy, tall quarterback, strong arm, and with that contract, I believe it leaves the Giants some room to also maybe acquire a couple pieces here and there. Maybe it's a little on the pricier end of things.
They need a receiver.
They do need a receiver.
Well, actually,
goodbye, Kenny Golladay. But
it's funny because it's kind of the exact opposite of being on the price here. And when you start reading the details, and this is why I just wanted to bring up the contract without the details to showcase the point that we do not rush to conclusions. Neither of you guys sat here and said, "Oh, it's stupid. He's making a ridiculous amount of money, and now they're never going to be able to afford anything else. It's stupid. Daniel Jones is stupid. All this stuff." Listen, we are fair, respectable men. All right, we don't rush to conclusions before understanding the terms. So here's the deal with the contract: $160 million for 4 years. $96 million is guaranteed. $35 million extra on top of the $160 is in incentives. Here's how it breaks down year by year. First year, $9.5 million guaranteed. Second year, $35.5 million guaranteed. Third year, $30 million guaranteed. So it's right around that ballpark of what we were saying with the $30 to $35 million for a short-term deal that we said. And then the fourth year is where it gets big, which is $46 million a year. But here's the thing: there's a clause in the contract where they could void it before that fourth year and only take $9 million in dead cap, which is ridiculous because most teams, whenever they sign a quarterback to a long-term deal, they have a massive dead cap hit if they decide to void the contract or release them early. And that's a big problem that with the next team we're going to talk about is having right now. But because they kind of left room in there for, if Daniel Jones doesn't do good these next 2 years, then they can void the contract and not take a massive cap hit. But if Daniel Jones still gets his money that he wants, he's still got the $40 million a year average that he wanted. And before cutting Kenny Golladay and the way they have it structured, they have $27 million going into free agency, and they've already they got Saquon and Daniel Jones locked down, and they still have $27 million for free agency, which is a lot. And then they still have the drafts coming up. So the Giants really set themselves up well here because the contract being lighter on the beginning and then building up later on, and then the way they have it structured with the cap hit is just beautiful. The front office for the Giants is a genius for this. And Daniel Jones got what he wanted. The Giants got what they wanted. I think that anyone who reads the terms of this contract agree that it's a pretty good deal all the way around. I think everyone involved is pretty happy. And the Giants are going to be nasty next year because they'll have $27 million to go spend on a true wide receiver, not Kenny Golladay. So
hopefully 2 true wide receivers because, I mean, they need a lot of help in that department. I would like to see Odell maybe come back. Obviously, he's, not a wide receiver 1 or 2 anymore.
Or 4
but,
for that matter.
Well, I mean, I think he can still, contribute to a team, but, I would like to see Odell come back and then hopefully they can pick up, a receiver in the draft who,
here's what I think.
You know who
you want to?
I was going to say, you know who I'm just like really hoping just balls out next year? Richie James. He was like not the best, but not the worst. But he ended up being like Danny Dimes' like main target near the end of the season, and he showed off some great footwork, great ball handling skills. I want to see how well he does this coming year because I believe he was a rookie last year, and I want to see how well from year 1 to the year 2 transition. Now that you're in that Brian Dable system, how well he plays from here on out. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah, they're still going to need some receivers, though. Maybe they might pick up someone at the draft.
Here's what I want. Here's what I think. Not what I think will happen. Here's what I think. In a perfect world for the Giants, go get T. Higgins, man. That guy could be a wide receiver 1 on, like we said before, 31 other teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
Go get him, pay him $18 to $20 million a year, which still leaves plenty of money in free agency. That's before making other cuts as well, and they didn't even have to pay him that much. Go get T. Higgins to be a wide receiver 1, and then draft another receiver. You could get Odell for probably pretty cheap since he's only going to play for, let's say, part of the season, limited snaps, red zone attempts, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Odell's not going to take any money. Like, teams are going to – I mean, there's a reason he wasn't signed this last year to any team.
Yeah, so they could go get someone. They could get T. Higgins. They could go get DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, there's plenty of free agent wide receivers, and then also the draft coming up that I think the Giants have set themselves up very, very well. But now we're going to move on to the exact opposite of setting yourself up very well. Move on to the Saints, who and I'm going to steal this analogy from Nick Wright on Fox. He's a commentator. He's brilliant analyst. He said that the Saints have a Ponzi scheme set up in the NFL. And I agree, because I was like, yeah, I understand that they've done some like questionable signings, but when you break down the numbers, it is disgusting what they're doing and what they're getting away with. They've been over the cap for a while and have somehow gotten away with it, but let's just start off with this. The Saints signed Derek Carr for $150 million for 4 years. Now, I like Derek Carr. I am a big fan of Derek Carr. I like him as a person. I think that he's a good quarterback who's just had horrible coaching and could be a guy somewhere. Now, the Saints is not where I thought he should go. Although it is a weak NFC South, the Saints need to just go to a rebuild, man. They need to just let it happen. They've been trying.
It's like signing Marcus Mariota on the Falcons. Honestly.
Yeah, kind of. The Falcons didn't pay out the ass for him, though, and the Falcons don't have a cap issue like the Saints do. The reason that it's bad for the Saints is because they paid Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston big money 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. And they're not doing anything. Jameis Winston's going to end up getting cut, which is a big cap hit. Oh, let me just break. I'm so scramble-brained from all the issues with the Saints, but I'm just going to go in order. 2 years ago, $50 million in dead cap. Last year, $45 million in dead cap. This year, they are already at $40 million in dead cap, and this is before cutting Jameis Winston, which is going to eat into that even more. And then potentially Michael Thomas, who hasn't played in years and is going to be a number you guys aren't going to believe when I tell you the cap hit that Michael Thomas will have next year. But they signed him to a 4-year, $150 million. They're effectively putting 25% of their money into dead cap every year, which means players that they're paying to not be on their team. Which the way that works, for those of you that don't know, is when you sign someone to a contract, and then before their contract is over, you cut them. So let's say I am the quarterback for the Saints. I get paid $200 million for 4 years, and after 2 years, they cut me. Well, what about that extra $100 million of that contract? Not all of it gets paid to me, of course, because they're not going to pay me $100 million to not play. But all that guaranteed money that I was talking about earlier, that's what quarterbacks want, is guaranteed money. But the reason teams don't want to pay guaranteed money is because if they get hurt or if they get cut or if they get arrested, God forbid, they're paying money for nothing. All that guaranteed money is just dead cap hit. They pay you even if you're not there. And that was going to be one of the problems with the Raiders if they didn't get rid of Derek Carr. He was going to have, I think, a $30 million dead cap hit if they didn't do what they did with him, which I guess smart for the Raiders to do what they did. But they already have $40 million in dead cap, and then getting rid of Jameis Winston and any other players are going to add to that, which means the Saints are going to be a horrible poverty franchise for a while. Derek Carr can't succeed just because of the system they have. They have way too much money going to players not on their team, so they can't spend that $50+ million on good players. Think about all the good players you could get to surround your franchise quarterback with $50 million. And that free agency hasn't even started yet, and they already have 40+. But currently, Michael Thomas has a $13 million cap hit. You want to know what Michael Thomas's cap hit is going to be next year?
Quite a bit more.
25. Oh no.
$59 million. A
Yikes.
$59 million cap hit, Michael Thomas. Because they signed him to a massive, I think it was a $96 million for 5-year deal. Yeah, it's crazy. And honestly, at the time,
I mean, to be fair, he was worth it
that's what I was
at
going to
that
say.
time.
He's worth it because he was, at the time, setting records for wide receivers for most receptions in a season. He had almost 2,000 yards, a lot of touchdowns, unguardable. Can't guard Mike was his nickname. But the fact that he hasn't played in years now, and that's why people keep thinking he's going to come back. Because
he hasn't played literally in 2 years. Like,
well,
has barely
to be
stepped
fair,
on the field.
he played this year for a game and a half and was on my fantasy team. And the one game he played, he balled out, and then the second game he played, he got hurt and was out again. But that's the problem. They can't get rid of Michael Thomas because they're going to have a $59 million cap hit in 2024 with this guy, and it's currently at $13 million, which is still massive for one player, especially a wide receiver. It's not even like you're paying $13 million for a quarterback. It's $13 million for a wide receiver to just not play. So the Saints have a Ponzi scheme.
Thomas.
And then 56
Slimy.
mil for, a wide receiver to not play.
Slimy, man. That's what I'm saying, because the Saints are they keep pushing off this inevitable rebuild because they were all in with Drew Brees to go win a ring, and they didn't do it. So now they're like, all right, all we need to do is replace this quarterback. We're going to bring in Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, before he got hurt, was balling. He threw like 5 touchdowns his first game for the Saints. Absolutely insane. The guy deserved an extension. He deserved a contract with them.
He had that W. He was
doing some of these, eating these W's. But the problem is,
on W's.
Jameis Winston has also gotten hurt the past 2 years and hasn't played either. And Taysom Hill, for whatever reason, got a massive contract, even though I think Taysom Hill is a good guy, very nice Swiss Army knife, running back, quarterback, tight end type guy. But he's not good enough at any of those positions to be worth $100+ million, which is what he got paid with his contract re-signed.
Correct.
So they're just paying money out the ass for guys that aren't doing anything for the team. So the Saints, just go into a rebuild, man. You should have let Derek Carr go to a team that, I don't know, let him go to the Panthers or something, because the Panthers are young.
Yeah, I was just
they've
about
got
to say that.
they've got some cheap guys on there. Let him go to the Panthers that actually have a chance in that division. The Saints are going to do another 8 or 9
Titans.
win season where they could maybe make the playoffs because the whole division sucks, but probably won't, and they're going to be massively in cap debt for the next few years. And Derek Carr, for some reason, they just paid him a lot of money to be that guy that they just kind of ride with while they eat the cap space. So screw you, Saints. I mean, I don't know what you're doing.
I mean, he'll help them sell tickets, and I think that's kind of all that they're doing right now is rather than going in that rebuild mode, from a business perspective, Derek Carr is someone that you can sell as, to your season ticket holders and whatever to convince that it's still worth, buying tickets and that you're not tanking. But, they are just riding with him, like you said, while, they're rebuilding essentially, or while they should be rebuilding essentially. And I mean, that team has so many issues, like with Alvin Kamara and, we're talking about Joe Mixon before, just like different things going wrong with the team, with the ownership. Not going to get into it all now because it's not important, but definitely,
the thing that I would identify with
the Saints are going to sell.
If I were the Saints and I wanted to get a guy that is not a bad quarterback, like you're not signing a guy that you are saying, hey, we're just going to rebuild because we signed this horrible quarterback. Go get Jimmy Garoppolo, because you could have gotten him for a lot cheaper than Derek Carr.
Yeah.
And as much as people like to say he's not that good of a quarterback, he is. Jimmy Garoppolo can win you games, and you're not going to be out of any game because of Jimmy Garoppolo. So I would have signed him for like a 2-year deal while you eat all this dead cap, and then worried about the future, because signing Derek Carr to a 4-year deal makes it seem like you're going to go try to win a Super Bowl with him, and it's not going to happen unless you just somehow have the absolute perfect draft and you can get every stud player on your team on rookie contracts, which is just unattainable. It's just not going to work out for them. I think that they're convinced that because they're in a weak division they can go do it. But you missed your chance, man. You gotta just eat the cap, go rebuild Saints, let this money hit, go find yourself some good rookies and develop them for the next couple years, and then try to win it afterwards. But they've missed their chance to do that, signing Derek Carr and eating $40+ million in dead cap. And I hate to bring it up again, but Michael Thomas and $59 million cap hit in 2024, which...
Dude, I can't even fathom that. That's just throwing away $59 million.
That is an absurd number, man.
Hey, you could pay me $1 million to not do anything. I'll go do what Michael Thomas is doing for $1 million.
Pay me like $100K and I'll go catch more balls than Michael Thomas, man. Like, he's catching 0 a season. I'll go catch... I mean, I ain't gonna be good. I mean, I'm not a big guy built for the NFL, but I mean, I'll catch a ball. I'll get you a few yards, and you can pay me $100,000, and I'll be stoked, dude. I'll move my whole family to New Orleans for that. Like, man. But you're keeping this guy on who, like we said earlier, to be fair, was the best guy in the entire freaking world at receiving balls a few years ago, but now it's just doing nothing, man. And that's like why I said that's why people keep thinking he's going to come back, is because they can't afford not to have him back. But man, yeah, we'll move on from that because the Saints are just depressing right now. We'll move on to another mildly big story. It probably is honestly bigger on paper than the rest of these, but I don't know. It doesn't pique my interest as much as the other ones. Lamar Jackson has been franchise tagged. He got the non-exclusive franchise tag, which I'll break that down for you, like I said I was going to earlier. The non-exclusive franchise tag essentially means that he's allowed to field offers from other teams, and the Ravens can trade him. Now, this is what I said, I think it was probably a month and a half ago at this point.
The Ravens can also match that.
Well, that's what I'm getting into. So that's what I'm breaking out with the non-exclusive. This is what I said was going to happen a month and a half ago, which is the Ravens are going to do a non-exclusive franchise tag, so that way they either keep him and pay him less than a regular franchise tag, or they can match any offer that he's given, or trade him for 2 firsts, which is like what I was saying earlier. They're going to franchise tag him and then trade him for 2 firsts. They can still do that. Now, the part of my prediction that's a flaw now is it seems like no one's interested in Lamar Jackson. Now, the contract breakdown in terms of salary is he's going to get paid $32 million instead of $45 million, which would have been with the exclusive because of the way they average salaries over the current top 5 or the past 2 years top 5, which is the difference between non-exclusive and exclusive. But like Frank said, let's say the Falcons make him an offer of $40 million a year for 6 years, $200 million guaranteed, exactly what he wants. The Ravens can then say, okay, well, we'll take that deal, and then they can match it and keep Lamar Jackson. So they did exactly what I thought they were going to do. But the problem now is that it seems like no one's interested in Lamar Jackson. Now, the biggest teams that were...
Which is crazy.
Well, kind of not. I'm going to get into that in a second. So the biggest
I kind of predicted it.
The biggest teams that were going to be in on the Lamar Jackson trade were the Falcons and the Commanders, and I think it was the Panthers, who have all now said they're not interested in Lamar Jackson. And while I think Lamar Jackson is that guy when it comes to being a quarterback, I think he deserves a big contract. I get it, because he has not played a lot of games the past few years. He's missed 40% of the last 2 seasons. I think it's right around that number. And as we're seeing with the Saints right now, giving a massive amount of guaranteed money can screw you in the future, especially if you're a quarterback like Lamar Jackson that has very risky play style and does get hurt pretty often. So I kind of get it. But what does that leave for Lamar Jackson? I think that at this point he's probably going to end up playing with the Ravens next year for $32 million because I don't see any other team giving him the $200 million guaranteed that he wants because that would just be a very long-term contract or a lot of money each year. And like I said, I think that what the Saints are doing is kind of scaring other teams into not wanting to get involved in a situation like that, which I totally understand. But it kind of just ruins the whole Lamar Jackson future thing. They kind of just screwed over his career. I don't think he's going to be happy about staying in Baltimore at this point. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Do you think he's still going to be traded? Do you think he'll stay? What are you guys thinking?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, one of the teams that really needed the most help at QB, I would argue, is the Commanders. And the fact that the Commanders didn't even want to touch him, that says a lot. Like if that's the case, the only teams that would be looking to have Lamar is if they're on a hot run, probably making it to the playoffs, but their main quarterback gets hurt. Then they'll make an offer. That's the only scenario I could really see Lamar. It's not to depreciate Lamar Jackson's ability or not, but like you said, when you have a mobile running quarterback who is a running back 50% of the snaps, he runs a lot of risk, and we've seen that risk take place within the last few years. And given all that, I mean, why would you invest in a quarterback that has an equal chance of playing as not sitting out, dude? Like it doesn't benefit the team in any way, shape, or form. And we're now seeing the wear and tear of that style of quarterback. They typically don't last as long. So personally, what other team could possibly need him at the meantime? I mean, other than the Panthers.
In my opinion, the Commanders were probably the top guys to get in because as much else as they've done already with this offseason, they are a quarterback away from being a really good team, being a 13-win team. And you think that Lamar Jackson...
I wish they got Carr.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the Commanders might get Carr. I figured they were going to make a move on one of these guys. They might go get Jimmy Garoppolo, which, fair enough. But you thought Lamar Jackson might be one of those guys because he is definitely better than any of the other free agent quarterbacks, but...
Right.
It's just too much of a problem what he's asking.
It's just too much
risk.
Yeah, that's the other thing. He
could go, and this is what I'll say, he could go to the Raiders, and I know that was being talked about, before, but I think that would be a pretty nasty lineup. I mean, you think about Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, and Lamar Jackson, like, that's to go to a basketball analogy, that's a pretty nasty big three on offense. And I mean, their wide receiver core is set perfectly. Josh Jacobs is, a running back who can take a lot of the rushing, away from, kind of like I was talking about with the Bears, as long as you have a running back who can take that, off of the quarterback, like that burden off of the quarterback, I think, you don't really have to worry about as much. And, Lamar Jackson is a great I mean, the dude was an MVP, right? So I don't think that, these teams are, trying to do something honestly. I think they're trying to go, in a sneaky way, kind of, just because of how the Browns have kind of screwed everybody, in that division over, with the deal that they did with Deshaun Watson, and, they're trying to pay him less. So I think that he's definitely worth more money, and I would love to see him honestly go to the Raiders because I think he would be a great.
Yeah, Raiders, I think that
I
think the Raiders are the top odds right now for where he's going to go because of all the reasons you just mentioned. I don't know. Once again, I just think that teams are going to see it as risky. I think the Raiders are probably the only place that would maybe go make an offer just because they need to be able to compete against some of the best teams in the entire NFL right now, which are all in their division.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's either the Raiders or stay with the Ravens. I mean, like I said, it's just tough to be able to take on that risk, and I guess the Raiders might be the team to do it, but I really thought the Commanders because a big issue with the Commanders the last few years is that Dan Snyder, the owner, has been needing to be gone for a while, and people have been thinking he's just setting up the Commanders.
Hey, he has good ideas. General Tutty is a good idea.
I'm going to get into some
Fight
serious
me.
stuff with the Raiders, or with the Commanders. General Tutty, although disgusting, is not as serious as some of the other stuff that I'm going to get into. But people have been thinking that he's trying to set up the team to sell. And people thought that the best time to do that would have been whenever they were rebranding, because then you're selling a team to someone who can make the team whatever they want. They didn't sell then, so now people are thinking, okay, they're going to go get Eric Bieniemy, they're going to go get Lamar Jackson, get a couple other guys, and then sell the team. And so then they got out of the whole deal, and so it's kind of like, well, what are they going to do now? But I'm just going to read off a list of allegations against Dan Snyder, because he's been probably the most prolific owner of a franchise for years now.
Now, these are allegations.
These are allegations. Financial misconduct, bank fraud, misuse of team funds, abuse of corporate bylaws, self-dealing, disregard of contractual and fiduciary duties, and sexual misconduct. So Dan Snyder is a guy that needs to get out of the building.
Just to throw that in at the end.
Whether it's all real or it's just allegations, Dan Snyder has a bad rap in the NFL and just needs to sell the team. And I think that getting Lamar Jackson
and none of the
would have
other
been a good time.
owners want him.
Well, it doesn't matter if any other owner wants him. He's not supposed to own an NFL team. That's not how it works, Frank. Whenever you sell one NFL team, you buy another. He just doesn't.
No. I understand that. I'm just saying none of the other owners want him in the league. There is an exclusive club, right, of people that own NFL teams, and none of the other owners like him. Other people have been saying, hey, sell the team, and trying to put pressure on him. And I think, honestly, that's part of it's like, interacting with coworkers that you don't like, except you have, a crap ton of money and you don't really have to work. It's just, a group of people that you have to meet with, right? These people are very, busy, and they like being able to, have control over who they interact with. And, if there's this one person that makes all of them look bad and, that is terrible to interact with, they're going to do what they can to, get rid of them, which might not be a ton, obviously, but, they can put stuff out like that. And I think there was, at one point, the possibility of Jeff Bezos selling the Washington Post in order to buy the
There was an update on that. Apparently,
team, so.
Dan Snyder did, and that's where some of these allegations come in. There was some I need to read it before I speak completely on it, but I'll do some research and mention it next week. There was something that Dan Snyder did that basically blocked Jeff Bezos from putting in a bid for the team, or something like that, or block him from being able to buy the team. Which Dan Snyder, I think, is just trying to hold on to the team. He doesn't want to sell it to anyone. Jeff Bezos is one of those guys that could actually afford it. So I would sell it to Jeff Bezos already. Yeah. Jeff Bezos could pay a lot of money for it. And Dan Snyder, just go retire, man. Go buy yourself 4 super yachts with the check Jeff Bezos cuts you, and don't do any work for the rest of your life, man. Just sell it. No, I don't mean to be a douche, but no one wants you anymore, Dan Snyder. You've done nothing but get rid of the loyalty that has been had in Washington's building for years. I mean, I don't know.
You go on the street, in D.C. anywhere, and everyone, I don't think you could ask a single person on the street, hey, do you like Dan Snyder, and have them say yes. Even people that don't know really a lot about the team or, about these things, everybody kind of just doesn't like Dan Snyder, and we say that from, personal experience, having been there quite a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, for sure. But we'll move on because, like I said, we're going to talk more about this later in the offseason, because I think some big things are going to happen with him this offseason, whether it be that he ends up selling or I don't know if there's some way to force him out. I think something's going to happen this offseason with him. But the last team I want to talk about with the franchise tag, re-signing, trade deals is the Chiefs, because you can't not talk about the Chiefs when you're talking NFL at this point. They did not franchise tag offensive tackle Orlando Brown, which a lot of people thought they might. I think that it's just too much money for the Chiefs to afford, which I get, but also he is a guy and you need to keep that O-line strong, so we'll see what they do. They might re-sign him to a longer-term deal. He went on the Pat McAfee show a couple weeks back and talked about his personal philosophy, whether it comes to wanting rings or money, and it's sort of a balance, obviously, with most people. So I think that if they can get him for the right price, they will sign him to a longer-term deal, which I think that will work out better for the Chiefs. If they end up not keeping him, I trust the process. it's the only team I'll say I trust the process with because I like the Chiefs, and they've proven that they know what they're doing when it comes to getting rid of people and keeping people. So I'm going to trust that they know what they're doing with that. The other thing that is big with the Chiefs, big news, is that they're going to release Frank Clark, their defensive end, who's been really good the past few years.
Yeah.
Now, the reason they're doing this...
Leading postseason sack, I think.
Now, I like this move. As a Chiefs fan, I like it because he... Yeah,
Ooh.
oh yeah, 100%. Because here's the thing. He takes up a lot of money, and they need to free up some money for other guys, like let's say maybe signing Orlando Brown to a longer-term deal. And there's a couple other defensive ends that they've been working on developing for a little bit now that I don't think are going to be as productive as Frank Clark, but will be productive enough that it's worth saving the money that they're going to be saving from releasing him. So I think that it's going to be worth it. Let them finish developing the defensive ends they have now, which there's one guy, his name is slipping my mind, that they've been building up particularly that's been doing very, very well. And they'll get him for a hell of a lot cheaper, and then that'll free up some money this offseason for, I don't know, a DeAndre Hopkins or re-signing Orlando Brown to a long-term deal or getting a Derrick Henry. I don't know. Whatever they want to do with their money this offseason. But we'll see with that. Last thing for NFL I'm going to mention this week because there's so much, and we kind of ran through it, is some of the Combine stuff, which we're going to talk more about the Combine as the draft gets closer and closer because that matters more for the draft than anything else. But I want to mention two things. Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of Florida, has had the single most impressive quarterback combine performance of any quarterback of all time. Every single thing that he's done has been basically the best that a quarterback's ever done. Every metric on paper, his 40 time, his 40-yard dash, his vertical, his broad jump, everything has been incredible with Anthony Richardson. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be a great quarterback because being able to read defenses, be good in the pocket, good pocket presence, that type of thing all matters. But it does increase his draft stock because I'll be honest, no one was talking about him before the Combine. They were talking about C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, all these other guys, and now Anthony Richardson is on people's boards. So
Bryce Young has fallen off entirely. I don't think anyone's talking about Bryce Young. It's all C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson.
It's just because he didn't do anything at the Combine, but he's doing his show at the Alabama Pro Day. So that's why he's not being talked about right now. It's just because he didn't do a Combine performance, which I don't know. People opt out of the Combine all the time. I think that Bryce Young is in a situation where he was going to get drafted either way in the first round, so it doesn't really matter. And then, like I said, he's doing his Pro Day with Alabama, so we'll see what Bryce Young does after that. But the other thing I want to mention, and I didn't realize this is really a thing until a couple days ago, but the Combine is completely useless for offensive linemen. Now, I heard one of the greatest offensive linemen in modern era, A.Q. Shipley, talk about it. It's completely stupid because nothing you do at the Combine is relevant to how you actually perform in an NFL game as an offensive lineman. Nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. You can be amazing in the Combine and horrible in the field and vice versa because the Combine has absolutely zero to do with it. Of any position, that has the worst trade-off, the worst transition from performance to performance, from Combine to on the field. And there was a lot of offensive linemen that got injured during this Combine because they were doing these drills. And so I think they either need to redo the drills or just let offensive linemen not do it because it seems pretty pointless if you're going to injure all these guys going into the draft just for it to not even mean anything because the Combine is pointless for them. And then lastly with the Combine is that tight ends were insane. Nearly every tight end that I'm actually nearly all because there were so many that aren't even being talked about, but of any class of position that was played, the tight end stuck out the most. There were a plethora of tight ends that just had absolutely insane days at the Combine. So I think tight ends are across the board are shooting up, and there might be a lot more tight ends drafted in the first 1, 2, or 3 rounds than people were originally thinking, which I think is awesome. I love tight ends. I think it's cool that they're getting their spectacle right now, and good for them. We'll talk more about the Combine, like I said, as it gets closer to draft and how the Combine performance actually affects their draft position. And then, draft spots get traded, free agencies are happening. It's going to be a big next couple of weeks for the NFL as all this stuff happens before we get to the sleep that will be the offseason. But that's all for NFL stuff today. I know we have a couple of NBA/UFC things to talk about. So, Frank, I will turn it over to you. But before you say anything, the first thing I want to talk about is Ja Morant.
Alrighty. Well, that was going to be the first thing in the NBA I was talking about as well. So, I think probably everybody knows by now Ja Morant has been having some, and I'm not going to say alleged because these things have been posted on social media. Just been having some personal issues He just received a 50-game suspension from the NBA, which is one of the longest suspensions in the modern era of the NBA that any player has received, let alone a player who was, an MVP candidate and playing, at the caliber that Ja Morant was playing. And it's not even for, like PEDs or, betting. It's for personal, problems and issues that, he has been having. For those of you who don't know or, aren't familiar with the situation, I'll kind of break it down real quick. Allegedly, a few years back, Ja Morant was beating a 17-year-old kid and had threatened him with a gun. And then also allegedly this past season, Ja Morant and other people from his squad threatened a Indiana Pacers agent with one of the people who worked in the building, for something apparently petty with a laser pointer, and made this individual feel uncomfortable. Then just last week, Ja Morant was at a club in Denver on his Instagram Live and was waving a gun around and throwing up gang signs. So
I just want to cut in for
reason
1 second and just, even though Frank said it, once again, this is all alleged, even if there is video proof, which it's all alleged, videos are what they are. But I just want to mention one detail about the beating a 17-year-old kid. Reports said that he punched him in the head 12 or 13 times. So just want to throw that detail out there. Allegedly, of course, 12 or 13 times in the head to a kid.
Yeah, those are alleged. The video, I mean, there's no disputing it. It was set on, First Take. It was, so I think, we're covered, if anything was to happen. But, and the reason that this is an issue is because of the fact that the NBA has a very strict no-gun policy when you're with the teams. And what this means was that Ja Morant had to have been traveling with this gun at the time that he was on the team plane, flying from Memphis to Denver. And so that's a huge breach of, NBA code of conduct policy and, just team policies in the NBA. And reportedly, 2 weeks ago as well, Steven Adams, one of the most legendary centers in the game, called the whole team together and said, listen, we need to stop going out and partying and doing these things that are ridiculous. We have championship expectations and need to conduct ourselves, as so. And if you go back to Matt Barnes' podcast a few weeks back, or maybe a few months back, I can't remember exactly when it was, Matt Barnes was talking with a few other ex-NBA players, and, they were talking about some different things that concerned them, that was happening in the league, and there was, mention of some things going on, with the Grizzlies and with those younger players like Dillon Brooks, Ja Morant, who were maybe not conducting themselves in a way, befit of an NBA contract or an NBA team, and now you're kind of seeing that come out. Obviously Dillon Brooks and Ja Morant got into a big scuffle with Shannon Sharp at one point. T. Morant, was also involved in that. So just a lot of drama, going on with that team. I think it's really unfortunate because Ja Morant is one of those rising stars in the NBA. And so many people, so many kids especially, look up to him, as a role model. And if this is, the way that you're going to be conducting yourself, even just say for selfish reasons, why would you want to conduct yourself like that? You're worth too much money. You're worth, too much to yourself, to your family, to the people around you. You're not doing anyone a service by conducting yourself, in this way. And for not selfish reasons, why are you setting this example for kids, that it's okay to do this? And it's just sad because it's I hate to say this, but it could be his Derrick Rose moment, where you have such a bright career, and thank God he wasn't injured, and thank God nothing happened with the gun, and everybody's safe with that regard. We'll find out about the 17-year-old, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. But it's just sad to see this happening, because so many people who were kids do look up to him, and it's just unfortunate. So I think he took the right steps in saying that he was going to address this problem for him. I hope that he is sincere in that, because I would love to see him back on the court. I think the NBA is a better place with John Morant playing, because he's just an electric player. I mean, and beyond that, he's a human being who you want to see do well, and do well for himself. And if he's going through these problems, you want to see him do well. Now, on the other hand, there is the chance that I think it was J.J. Redick mentioned this, and Skip Bayless, but are you sure that he's not who the media is portraying him to be? It's a possibility that people are buying in too much and giving him too much the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to comment whether or not I think that is the case, but it is a possibility. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on this situation, but it's pretty serious, pretty big. To my knowledge, nothing like this has really happened at least in the last 5 to 10 years in the NBA. And no, and I mean, some stuff happened with Carmelo Anthony, when Melo first got into the league, and he had to talk to David Stern, but the NBA knows what's going on. Yeah. So it's you can't
Here's what I'll say.
Hide this stuff.
Now I'll preface by saying we do a good job of keeping our politics out of our sports commentating, and we will continue to do so. We will never make a political statement on this show unless there's something egregious happening. So aside from any viewpoint we have about guns, because I know that's a big political issue, the rules are the rules, whether you think that you should be allowed to possess a firearm or not. If the team's rules are that you cannot have a firearm when you're with the team, then that's the rules. It's the league that you signed up to play. It's just like if you have a job. Most companies that you work for, even if you're in a state that allows you to just have a gun, like no questions asked, you can have a gun, you don't even need a permit. Most places of work, you can't bring a gun into work. That's just the rules of most workplaces. And the NBA is no different. If they say you're not allowed to bring a gun, to work with you, you have to listen to that. And if you got caught with one at your normal job, you will be fired. I think that the fact that he got a 50-game suspension is a lot, but it's also, he's kind of lucky that that's all he got, because they could have just banned him from ever playing again. And although that would have been a very egregious punishment, they could have used him to make an example out of what happens when you disobey a rule such as bringing a firearm around your team. So as much as maybe we view one way about guns the other, he broke the rules. The rules are what they are, and he got his punishment. So that's about all I can say about it. I think 50 games is a lot, but I think that it will teach him a lesson not to break the rules like that again if he really values playing in the NBA. So I don't know. What about you, Gian?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, personally, I actually am a very big fan of John Morant. Me and my brother would always watch his highlight reels. My brother especially was very good at mimicking his play style and everything. I actually learned how to dribble watching John Morant handle the ball. It's a little sad to see that that allegedly he did these things and whatnot, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't really know, but I just hope that there is some sort of happy ending to this, and that I just want to see Ja back. Obviously, rules are rules. What's just is just. So I'd like to see him back on the court. I'd like to see him make a rebound, and if he really did do these things, maybe come back a better man. Everybody deserves second chances. Even superstars, even the people we look up to, and I hope everybody hopes the best for Ja. I respect the Grizzlies as an organization, and I respect the NBA. And who knows? Maybe in a couple years we'll see Ja win a ring. So, or
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
No, definitely. Definitely. That, I think, kind of concludes the stuff about Ja. Let's move on to some other drama currently happening in the NBA. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. I don't know if you guys watched the game where the Mavs played the Suns, but we need that to happen in the playoffs. NBA gods, make this happen, because that was an electric matchup. I mean, just dueling back and forth, crazy stat lines from both, sets of superstars. I am a huge fan, of obviously Devin Booker. I, have his jersey. I've been a fan of him, since he dropped the 70-point game against the Celtics. I'm not so much a fan of Kevin Durant. I like Chris Paul quite a bit. Love Kyrie Irving as a player, and love Luka Doncic. So, I mean, I think can't really have, crazier, playoff series with that. But the reason that I bring it up is that during, before the game and after the game, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant didn't interact at all. Just barely interacted. Really, didn't talk at all. And I just think that's interesting. It was a huge in New York, I guess, point of contention that they were friends. There was no breaking them up, whatever. And it's interesting to see that now that they're on different teams, it looks like, Kevin and Kyrie are no longer friends. Now, why we care about this, I don't know. It's just an interesting, NBA topic. But it's just sad to see, I guess, as a Nets fan, that these guys are playing, how they're playing now, and you didn't get to see that big three really do anything in Brooklyn. But definitely an interesting, possible, thing. So, anyways, on to the next NBA thing. LeBron James is injured currently, but the Lakers have been doing really well. What do you guys think, now that the trade, where they gave Russell Westbrook and some picks for D'Angelo Russell and Mo Bamba? What do you guys think about that trade? Do you think it was worth it? Not worth it? Now that we've got some games behind us.
I probably good. I mean, I like Russell Westbrook. He's one of my personal favorites in terms of just him as a guy. But I think that everyone kind of agrees that his performance wasn't the greatest where he was, as good as it could be, and as good as everyone knows that he can be. So I think that it's probably best. That I think the trade was a positive for both sides, because just the way, like you said, they've been doing better, even without LeBron the past little bit. And so I think that, if you're winning, that's really the stat that matters. So I think it was probably a good trade.
Yeah.
Me personally, sorry to say this, Ethan, but I've never liked Russell Westbrook at all. I always thought he had that diva factor to him. I didn't really. Don't get me wrong; he's a talented individual. One-on-one, he'll probably have a good chance against me. No, all jokes aside, one-on-one, he destroyed me and all that. But that being said, I don't know, man. To build a team with Russ, I think you need a specific set of chemistry with that team, and I don't think it was there at the Lakers. And getting D'Angelo Russell and Mo Bamba kind of, I think, fits a couple pieces that they need. Again, I haven't been watching much of the Lakers lately, but push come to shove, I mean, I just never liked Russ, and even when he was on OKC and whatnot, and put up a fight against Miami and all that, still just not my cup of tea. I think it was smart of the Lakers to get rid of him. I mean, you have LeBron, but unfortunately he's hurt. on that team that they play similarly, and I would rather have LeBron as much as I can, even if he is taking breaks or even if he is hurt. But I'd still take LeBron any day over Russell Wilson. So, just me.
No, definitely. Unless you guys have anything else about NBA, I think that wraps NBA up. And then, just because I know we're kind of going longer, I will wrap things up. About UFC really quickly. We have the undisputed greatest of all time. No questions asked. I'm not sure what other adjectives you can throw in there, but the pound for pound GOAT, John Jones, he came back. He absolutely ragdolled Cyril Gahn, left zero doubt in anyone's mind that he is the greatest of all time. First round submission.
You can't say anything about it because it's not even like it took him time. It's not even like I was like, oh, he's got to, grease up the wheels, knock out the cobwebs, and ease back into it. He made this guy pass out in the first 2 minutes of the fight. John Jones is him.
Yep.
He is that guy.
Yeah.
It's like that scene from the Avengers where Hulk grabs Loki and just smashes him everywhere. John Jones is just a monster, dude.
No, seriously. I mean, the skill gap between John Jones and anyone else in the UFC is just crazy. I mean, pound for pound, everything being the same, I don't know that there's anyone in the UFC that could beat John Jones.
What's the problem now?
People want to talk about
who actually beats John Jones. Like, do you think he just ends up retiring undefeated at some point, or do you think that he will go until he loses a fight?
Yeah, I think he ends up retiring in the next 2 or 3 years. He's gonna, he has to run through a few people in the heavyweight division, but I don't think that there's anyone in the heavyweight division who can give him, a challenge. Now, the last time we saw him, 3 years ago, he was in the light heavyweight division, absolutely, ragdolling people, and then he got bored and was doing, decision wins. And people weren't interested in seeing that. And then, obviously, unfortunately, he had a bunch of personal stuff go on, and then, he comes back 3 years later to the heavyweight division to say, hey, knock, knock, I'm the boogeyman. I am that guy. I am the pound-for-pound, king. So, he's going to fight Stipe. Being from Cleveland, being from Ohio, I'm a huge Stipe Miocic fan. I want to have him on this show at some point. I want to have some of his teammates on the show at some point just to break that down. But I think that, unfortunately, unless Stipe, does some crazy good things, and, I think that Stipe's fight, IQ and style is a lot like Alexander Gustafsson, where if you guys have watched, that fight, you'll know that he's probably the only person who gave John Jones a run for his money. Took John Jones 5 rounds, and it was just an absolute slugfest. I think that Stipe, could do that, but Stipe is also, getting older. And, really, we saw him get, just his lights put out against Francis Ngannou. And, I think that after you get knocked out like that, your chin is different. Stipe obviously has had an amazing chin his entire career, but when you get your lights put out like that, by someone who hits as hard as a Ford truck, ramming into you at full speed, then it's difficult to recover from. So I don't know, how you guys, if you have any early predictions, for that fight, but I think, John Jones retires in the next few years as the greatest of all time in the UFC, and I don't see anyone coming close, to his legacy.
Also, I just want to clarify because I realized earlier I said that he retires undefeated, and I know people in the comments are going to say, "Oh, but he lost the fight." No, he didn't. All right, that doesn't count, the fight that he lost, because it was completely controversial, and I don't think anyone with a brain agrees that John Jones lost that fight. So I will continue saying that John Jones is undefeated until he loses a match that is a consensus, yeah, he lost, gets knocked out, passes out, submitted, whatever it may be. The one that he lost, everyone agrees was controversial, including the UFC, so... Just want to throw that out there before I get people in the comments angry. But before we wrap up, I want to mention one other fight on the UFC 285 card that I'm not sure either of you even know about, and I don't think anyone ever in the universe ever knows about it because it was an early preliminary match. It was Cameron Simon versus Mana Martinez. It was a bantamweight fight. I want to mention this fight because I saw the highlights from this fight. Now, I'm not as involved in UFC as Frank, but I do get it up on my feed because I do interact with the content. I do keep up, a fair bit. Like I know about John Jones, obviously. I know about a lot of these other guys that we talk about, not as much as Frank, but I do see fights occasionally. And I saw the Mana Martinez Cameron Simon fight. Now, I'm going to read off their records just for the sake of it. Cameron Simon is 8-0. Mana Martinez is 10-4-0. And then, Cameron Simon 8-0-0. Now, Cameron Simon won this fight by decision after 3 rounds, and I want to say it is BS because I don't think anyone else is going to be online fighting for Mana Martinez. Here's what happened. Cameron Simon kicked him in the nuts twice in the fight. And then he poked and then he poked him in the eye, just straight up right in the eyes. Now, each time the ref was like, all right, stop, give him a few minutes, like, you can't do that, it's not allowed, you're not supposed to do shots like that. You should have disqualified him. When you kick a guy in the nutsack twice and then jab his eyes out with your eyes, you need to be disqualified. The fact that Cameron Simon is still undefeated as a bantamweight, 8-0-0, and then Mana Martinez got kicked in the nuts twice with a minute or two of recovery and then jabbed in the eyes is ridiculous. So I just want to say here, Mana Martinez, you deserve that, and it was complete BS that you were given a loss based on the way that Cameron Simon violated your family jewels in that fight. That is just complete BS. So I just want to put that on the record, coming from the Sports Ball Talk Show. I think we all agree that if you get kicked in the nuts multiple times and then jabbed in the eyes, it should be a DQ. But the ref decided no.
Hey, your
instant.
We here at the Sports Ball Talk Show think that your sports balls are important. So let's try and protect those, UFC. No, Ethan, you bring up a great point. I did not watch the fight because I was not able to, but know what you're talking about, and it's a huge thing that a lot of UFC purists are talking about, where and this isn't the only time that this has happened, but that should be an immediate point disqualification, as well as eye pokes. Both those change the outcome of a fight, and if you're trying to keep things clean, and if the rules clearly state that there are no eye pokes allowed and that there's no nut shots allowed, then there should be a point deduction for that. There should be no warning. It shouldn't be up to the refs. If it is in fact, you go to the review and you see that clearly the eye was poked, or clearly there was a hit below the belt, there should be. I'm a big believer in this. I know Joe Rogan, talks about this, and other, UFC, commentators and talking heads and fighters too, that, and this is actually something, that John Jones, has an issue with, that Stipe, eye pokes sometimes, that Daniel Cormier pokes, in the eye sometimes. Adesanya, does this at times. A lot of people, do this occasionally, maybe not on purpose. The Usman Covington fight, you saw this happen. It changed the outcome of a fight. And so, I think that, like in boxing, if you do something dangerous or something to change the outcome, of a fight, I think that there needs to be a 1-point deduction, and, you need to, make that clear, because then fighters will take that a lot more seriously. And one other thing, that kind of plays into that, with the eye poke, not so much, with the kick below the belt, but is the gloves, in the UFC. Gloves in the UFC, for, those of you that watch, you already know, they're, UFC Venom gloves, and it, when you put them on, your hands are like this, right? Trevor Whitman, who is one of the legends, in the UFC, probably one of the greatest striking coaches of all time. Coaches like Rose Namajunas, Justin Gaethje, people like that, has developed a glove that keeps your hands closed like this, so that when you're fighting, it's not a problem having your fingers out like this, because you're not having to struggle to keep your hands in. So when your hand naturally is like this, if you go in, the chance that you're going to poke someone in the eye with your fingers is a lot less, than it would be with these UFC gloves. Now, I know there was, talks about that at one point, getting those gloves on, and then they, kind of, dematerialized, unfortunately. But I think that if you're talking about, fighter safety and, interesting fights, because no one wants to see a fight end because of an eye poke or, something like that. So I think, just in the interest of having a better product, get those gloves, UFC, because Trevor Whitman knows what he's doing, with striking and knows how to keep things clean. And if you have, gloves that do that, and, encourage that, I think you're going to have a lot more interesting of a product.
Yeah,
so.
100%. I think that's kind of the same deal with player safety that we talk about a lot in the NFL with the turf versus grass argument, the roughing the passer rules, all that type of stuff. It's the same thing with the UFC. I mean, UFC is, I was going to say arguably, but it definitely is more brutal. I mean, you're literally beating the shit out of each other. That's the point of it. So it is. So yeah, that's one thing they should definitely look into. I'm sure it's probably some money thing that they have with whatever, producer they get for the regular gloves, but I'm not going to speculate, but either way, you are completely correct with that because, no one wants to see that fight end on that, especially when you're young and trying to make something of yourself. You're not really getting those opportunities, like with this, like, very early card fight that no one really is going to watch, and then you get your chance, in UFC, and then that happens. It just sucks. But that's all we got for today. UFC, football, basketball, all that good stuff. We'll be back next week with, obviously, plenty more stuff. Basketball, football, and etc. So, Gian, close us out.
All right. Friends, family, fans of the Sports Ball Talk Show, stay frosty. Take it easy, too.